I didn't presume that I could come out of the Blackjacks with the banner of truth flying, but that I might be able to devote a few years to pleasant, undisturbed living. I had thought, incidentally, that I might find some connection between man's artificial ornamentation and the useless ornamentation among the creatures of my little corner of the earth. I realized that man's artistic creations and his dreams, often resulting in beauty, as well as fumbling toward God, must be primal, possibly the results of the biological urge which inspires the wood thrush to sing and the coyote to talk to the moon.
He's special in a lot of ways. He was very, very, very intelligent. His whole family is amazingly intelligent. And then going to Oxford and getting a degree from Oxford is pretty unique, certainly around here. But what made him unique, I think, and what made him better known than anything is what he did for the Osage people. And right after the Conservancy purchased this cabin, I brought the current Osage chief out here. Right after we got title, brought the Osage chief out here. He stood in front of that fireplace, took off his hat, and said, "John Joseph Mathews was my hero. He did more than anybody else for the Osages." And what he did is Mathews, with the standing he had within the tribe and the respect that he had, the full-bloods that were clinging to their ancestral ways and wouldn't talk to outsiders about their beliefs, their customs, their way of life, would talk to him. And they realized that the knowledge they had was going to be gone when they died. And so they confided in Mathews, and he chronicled an untold history of the Osages. They didn't have a written history, they just had oral history. And that oral history was dying. And so he wrote a book called The Osages, Children of the Middle Waters. And in that, he goes into great detail about their clans, their beliefs, their way of life, how they interacted with other Indian tribes. And if Mathews hadn't done that, that knowledge would have been lost forever. So that was his biggest contribution. Plus, he was a very astute student of nature and wildlife, and he entertained literary giants out here at his cabin. He called this the Blackjacks because a lot of blackjack oak trees grow here. The Nature Conservancy is a very large private nonprofit conservation organization. In 1989, they purchased 29,000 acres here that was part of the Chapman-Barnard Ranch. It was the historic Barnard portion of the Chapman-Barnard Ranch. Since then, the Conservancy has acquired title to another 10,000 acres. They own 39,000 acres and lease an additional 1,000 acres situated within those boundaries. That preserve wrapped around Mathews' property here on three sides. So by buying this, it really cinched up our southwestern boundary. And now it's part of the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. And this fall, or early winter, after the bison roundup is finished and we get the fencing finished, we'll open this land up to grazing by bison. We had a group of Osages that came out here, and one of the guides that led them here is a relative of John Joseph Mathews that happens to be a docent for the Tallgrass Prairie Preserve. So it's pretty neat to have his family bringing visitors out here to see his cabin.
My name is Patricia Webster, and I am a first cousin thrice removed of John Joseph Mathews. And that means that my great-grandmother and Joe, that's what he's called in our family, is Joe Mathews, they were first cousins. My interest in conservation, nature, stems from my childhood. I grew up in a family of hunters and fishermen, and to go on a weekend fishing trip was not unusual as a child, and we were always taught to leave things better than they were when you got there. So that's always been an interest in my life. Then when the Tallgrass Prairie opened, I kept thinking, I should become a docent. I should become a docent. The article in the newspaper would come out about signing up to be a docent, and I would think, I should do that, I should do that. The years went by, I never did that. until the John Joseph Mathews cabin was bought. So the next year, I became a docent, and I've been a docent since 2016 up at the Tallgrass Prairie. This was added later. It's the kitchen. The fireplace is where many of the meals were cooked. Of course, some of them were cooked outside. This door was we just walked through, that was the original front door. This was the main room. This is where all of the mounts were. This is where all of the taxidermy that he practiced on. This is where all the mounts were, the prairie chickens, the quail, even had elk that he did. So this room was just full of those things. The motto that he adopted, that he put on his fireplace, on the mantel, he discovered whenever he was in Africa. But it's to hunt, to bathe, to play, to laugh. That is to live. This is the porch. This is where he slept every night. There were shades that he would put up on the windows. It's just screened, but he loved it out here. Snow, rain, didn't matter. He loved it. This building was built as a well house, pump house, eventually storage building. And it was built in the 60s, so that's the cinder blocks. But John Joseph Mathews did all of the paintings, and the paint is still there. That's what I'm always amazed at. And so this is kind of like his idea of the history of mankind, I think. But some are a little bit odd. For instance, on this one, if you can look real close, maybe you too can find the unicorn. Then he goes on around the corner. And these are some Osage, a dancer and a drummer. And if you look closely here, you can even still see some pencil markings or charcoal markings or whatever that show like the rough draft of the original.
Matthews' favorite book, according to his daughter, was Talking to the Moon. And that book was published in 1945. It was based upon his first 10 years of living here in the Blackjacks. And it's a fascinating look at nature, wildlife, and the area here in Osage County. In the book, he laments the loss of so many things. No wild turkeys, no white-tailed deer, and so many of the birds like trumpeter swans had been gone forever. They almost became extinct. Passenger pigeons, I don't remember if he talks about them, but they were extinct. Carolina parakeets were extinct. But he laments the loss of wildlife with white settlement. And so when we bring the bison back into this area, I think Mathews would be very pleased to see bison roaming on his land when they haven't been here since the early to mid 1800s.
I think that I would hope that Joe would be honored that his cabin, his property, are now a part of the Nature Conservancy's Tallgrass Prairie. I mean, long after his time here on Earth. And it's kind of getting a rebirth, a renewal in interest. I also think he'd be pretty excited to know that there are bison roaming nearby, yes.
After 10 years of joyous living in rhythm with the life about me, I have reached maturity and the stage of ornamentation expressed by worry over the peace of the world, the future of my nation, the passing of the landmarks along the jungle river of time. Now I have a deep desire to say, I have passed by here. I was proud of harmony with the life about me. I became a part of it as I had wished.